it goes on and on and on.
Remind me of
I am Angelica May Cortez, assigned to report the Commonwealth Constitution.
So good day everyone, I am Elami Isasenat and I am the one who is tasked to report the 1987, the Constitution after martial law.
I am Jelly Kumaling, tasked to report about constitutional authoritarianism.
Good day everyone, my name is Abigail T. Lapas and my task is to report about the 1897 Biak na Bato Constitution and 1899 Malolos Constitution. Constitution of the Philippines, defined as a set of fundamental principles or established precedents according to which a state or other organization is governed, to be a part of a whole, the coming together of distinct entities into one group with the same principles and ideals. The principles define the nature and extent of government. The supreme law of the Republic of the Philippines, in effect since 1987, there were only three other constitutions that governed the country: the 1935 Commonwealth Constitution, the 1973 Constitution, and the 1986 Freedom Constitution. 1897 Constitution of the Biak na Bato was a provisionary constitution of the Philippine Republic during the Philippine Revolution, was promulgated by the Philippine Revolutionary Government on November 1, 1897, was borrowed from Cuba, copied almost word for word, was written by Isabelo Artacho and Felix Ferrer in Spanish, and later on translated into Tagalog. Primary source: Preamble of the 1897 Constitution of the Biak na Bato. The separation of the Philippines from the Spanish monarchy and their formation into an independent state with its own government called the Philippines Republic has been the end sought by the revolution in the existing war begun on the 24th of August 1896, and therefore, in its name and by the power delegated by the Filipino people, interpreting faithfully their desires and ambitions, in a meeting at Biak na Bato, November 1, 1897, unanimously adopted the following articles for the Constitution of the state. Organs of the government: the Supreme Council, headed by the President and four department secretaries: the Interior, Foreign Affairs, Treasury, and War; the Consejo Supremo de Gracia y Justicia, Supreme Council of Grace and Justice, make decisions and affirm or disapprove the sentences rendered by other courts and to dictate rules for the administration of justice. The Asamblea de Representantes, Assembly of Representatives, to be convened by the Revolution to create a new constitution and elect new council of government and representatives of the people. The said truce pact treaty of Biak na Bato happened through the intercession of a mestizo named Pedro A. Paterno, who acted as a mediator in the negotiation between the Filipinos and the Spaniards. From August to December 1897, Paterno negotiated with President Emilio Aguinaldo and Governor General Primo de Rivera, which stated the following conditions. That Aguinaldo and his companions would go into voluntary exile abroad, that Primo de Rivera would pay the sum of 800,000 to the rebels in 3 installments, 400,000 to Aguinaldo upon his departure from Biak na Bato, 200,000 when the arms surrendered by the revolutionists exceed 700, and the remaining 200,000 when the Te Deum was sung and General Assembly proclaimed by the governor. That Primo de Rivera would pay the additional sum of 900,000 to the families of the non-combatant Filipinos who suffered during the armed conflict. It was Paterno, however, who signed the truce as a representative of the revolutionists. 1899 Malolos Constitution. After the signing of the truce, the Filipino revolutionary leaders accepted a payment from Spain and went to exile in Hong Kong in December 27, 1897. Upon the defeat of Spain to the Americans in the Battle of Manila Bay on May 1, 1898, the United States Navy transported Aguinaldo back to the Philippines. Control of the Philippines revolutionary forces reverted back to Aguinaldo and the Philippine Declaration of Independence was issued on June 12, 1898, together with several decrees that formed the First Philippine Republic. The Malolos Congress was elected, which selected a commission to draw up a draft constitution on September 17, 1898, which was composed of wealthy and educated men. Came up with the Political Constitution of 1899, written in Spanish, approved by the Congress on November 29, 1898, and promulgated by Aguinaldo on January 21, 1899. The Constitution has 39 articles, divided into 14 titles, with 8 articles of transitory provisions and a final additional article. Patterned after the Spanish constitutions of 1812 with influences from the charters of Belgium, Mexico, Brazil, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and Guatemala, and the French constitutions of 1793. According to Felipe Calderon, man author of the Constitution, these countries were studied because they shared similar social, political, ethnological, and governance conditions with the Philippines. Also, influenced by the Cartilla and the Sangguniang Hukuman, the Charter of Laws and Morals of the Katipunan, written by Emilio Jacinto in 1896, the Biak na Bato Constitution of 1897, planned by Isabelo Artacho, Mabini's constitutional program of the Philippine Republic of 1898, the Provisional Constitution of Mariano Ponce in 1898 that followed the Spanish constitutions, and the autonomy projects of Paterno in 1898. Primary source preamble of the 1899 Malolos Constitution. We, the representatives of the Filipino people, lawfully convent in order to establish justice, provide for common defense, promote the general welfare, and ensure the benefits of liberty, imploring the aid of the sovereign legislator of the universe for the attainment of these ends, have voted, decreed, and sanctioned the following political constitutions. Title IV has 27 articles which detail the natural rights and popular sovereignty of the Filipinos, the enumeration of which does not imply the prohibition of any other rights not expressly stated. Title III, Article 5 declares that the state recognizes the freedom and equality of all beliefs, as well as the separation of the church and the state. Title II, Article: The form of government is to be popular, representative, alternative, and responsible, and shall exercise 3 distinct powers: legislative, executive, and judicial. Legislative power vested in a unicameral body called the Assembly of Representatives, members of which are elected for terms of 4 years. Secretaries of the government were given seats in the Assembly, which meet annually for a period of at least 3 months. Bills could be introduced either by the President or by a member of the Assembly. Some powers not legislative in nature were also given to the body, such as the right to elect its own officers, right of censure and interpellation, and the right of impeaching the President, cabinet members, the Chief of the Supreme Court, and the Solicitor General. Executive power vested in the President and elected by a constituent assembly of the Assembly of Representatives and Special Representatives. President's term 4 years without re-election, no vice president, and in case of vacancy, a president was to be selected by the Constituent Assembly. The 1899 Malolos Constitution was never enforced due to the ongoing war. The Philippines was effectively a territory of the United States upon the signing of the Treaty of Paris between Spain and the United States, transferring sovereignty of the Philippines on December 10, 1898.
1935, the Commonwealth Constitution. After the Treaty of Paris in 1898, Philippines was subject to the power of the United States of America, effectively the new colonizer of the country. 1891 to 1901, Philippines was placed under a military government until a civil government would be put in place. Two acts of the United States Congress were passed that may be considered to have qualities of constitutionality. Organic Act of 1902, first organic law for the Philippine island that provided the creation of popularly elected Philippine Assembly, specified that legislative power would be vested in a bicameral legislature composed of Upper House, Philippine Commission, and Lower House, Philippine Assembly. Key provisions included a Bill of Rights for Filipinos and the appointment of two non-voting Filipino resident commissioners of the Philippines as representative to the United States House of Representatives. Philippine Autonomy Act of 1916, commonly known as Jones Law, which modified the structure of the Philippine government through the removal of the Philippine Commission, replacing it with Senate that served as the upper house and its members voted by the Filipino voters. The first truly elected national legislature explicitly declared the purpose of the United States to end their sovereignty over the Philippines and recognize Philippine independence as soon as stable government can be established. 1932, many efforts of the Filipino Independence Mission led by Sergio Osmeña and Manuel Rojas, the United States Congress passed the Warehouse Cutting Act with the promise of granting Filipinos independence, was opposed by then Senate President Manuel L. Quezon and consequently rejected by the Philippine Senate. Or Tidings-McDuffie Act, also known as Philippine Independence Act, was passed by the United States Congress that provided authority and defined mechanism for the establishment of a formal constitution by a constitutional convention, members of which were elected and held their first meeting on July 30, 1934, with Claro M. Recto anonymously elected as president. Primary source: Preamble of the 1935 Constitution. The Filipino people, imploring the aid of divine providence in order to establish a government that shall embody their ideals, converse and develop their patrimony of the nation, promote the general welfare, and secure themselves and their posterity and blessings of independence under a regime of justice, liberty, and democracy, do ordain and promulgate the Constitution. This Constitution created the Commonwealth of the Philippines, an administrative body that governed the Philippines from 1935 to 1946. A transitional administration to prepare the country towards its full achievements of independence. Originally, it provided for a unicameral National Assembly with a president and vice president elected to a 6-year term without re-election. It was amended in 1940 to have a bicameral Congress composed of a Senate and a House of Representatives, as well as the creation of an independent electoral commission, and limited the term of office of the president and vice president to 4 years with one re-election. Right of suffrage were originally afforded to male citizens of the Philippines who are 24 years of age or over and are able to read and write. This was later on extended to women within 2 years after the adoption of the Constitution. While the dominant influence in the Constitution was American, it is also bears traces of the Malulus Constitution, the German, Spanish, and Mexican constitutions of several South American countries, and the unwritten English Constitution. The draft of the Constitution was approved by the Constitutional Convention on February 8, 1935, and ratified by the U.S. President Franklin B. Roosevelt on March 25, 1935. Election was held in September 1935, and Manuel L. Quezon was elected President of the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth was briefly interrupted by the events of World War II, with the Japanese occupying the Philippines. Afterward, upon liberation, the Philippines was declared an independent republic on July 4, 1946.
In 1965, Ferdinand A. Marcos was elected president, and in 1967, Philippine Congress passed a resolution calling for a constitutional convention to change the 1935 Constitution. Marcos won the re-election in 1969 in a boosted campaign overspending the use of government funds. On November 20, 1970, election of delegates to the Constitutional Convention were held. Then, on June 1, 1971, convention began formally, with former President Carlos P. Garcia being elected as a convention president. Unfortunately, he died and was succeeded by another former president, Diosdado Macapagal. Before the convention was finished, martial law was declared. Some of the delegates of the ongoing constitutional convention were placed behind bars, and others went into hiding or were voluntarily exiled. With Marcos as dictator, the direction of a convention torn, with accounts that the president himself dictated some provisions of the constitution, manipulating the document to be able to hold power for as long as he could. On November 29, 1972, the convention approved its proposed constitution. The constitution was to be introduced a parliamentary-style government where the president was to be elected as a symbolized and ceremonial head of states chosen from the government, and the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, who was also to be elected from the National Assembly. The president would serve as a 6-year term and would be re-elected to an unlimited number of terms. November 13, 1973. President Marcos issued Presidential Decree Number 73, setting a date from a presides the proposed constitution. On January 17, 1973, announcing the proposed constitution has been clarified by the overwhelming voting of the members of the highly irregular citizen assemblies. After all the amendments introduced, the 1973 Constitution was merely a way for the President to keep executive powers, abolish the Senate, and by the means never acted as a parliamentary system, instead functioned as an authoritarian presidential system with all the real power concentrated in the hands of a president with the backing of a constitution. In August 1983, where widespread suspension that the orders to assassinate Aquino came from the top level of a government and military. Marcos was then forced to hold snap elections a year early. He declared himself winner despite international condemnation and nationwide protest. However, This triggered what come to be known as an People Power Revolution 1986. Under pressure from the United States of America, who used to support Marcos and his martial law, the Marcos family fled and exile. This opponent in the snap elections, Benigno Aquino Jr. Meadow Corazon Aquino, was installed as president on February 25, 1986.
So I am the one who is tasked to report in 1987 the Constitution after martial law. So President Corazon Aquino's government had three options regarding the Constitution. First is the revert to the 1935 Constitution. The second is to retain the 1973 Constitution. And third is be granted power to make reforms or start anew and break from the vestiges of this grayish dictatorship. They decided to make a new constitution that, according to the president herself, should be truly reflective of the aspirations and ideas of the Filipino people. In March 1896, President Aquino proclaimed a transitional constitution to last for a year while a constitutional commission drafted a permanent constitution. The transitional constitution, called the Freedom Constitution, maintained many provisions of the old one, including in rewriting from the presidential right to rule by decree. In 1986, a constitutional convention was created, composed of 48 members appointed by the President Aquino from varied backgrounds and representations. The new constitution was officially adopted in February 2, 1987. The new constitutions begin with a preamble and 18 self-contained articles. It established the Philippines as a democratic republican state where sovereignty resides in all people and all government authority emanates from them. It allocates government powers among the executive, legislative, and judicial branches of the government. The first is the executive branch, headed by the President and his cabinet, whom he appoints. The President is the head of the state and the chief executive, but his power is limited by significant checks and the other two co-equal branches of the government, especially during times of emergency. This is put in place to safeguard the country from the experience of martial law despotism during the presidency of Marcos. In case of emergency, the president may still declare martial law, but no longer than a period of 60 days. Congress, through a majority vote, can revoke this decision or extend it for a period that they determine. The Supreme Court may also review the declaration of martial law and decide if there were sufficient justifying facts for the act. The President and the Vice President are elected at large by a direct vote, serving a single 6-year term. The second is the legislative branch. Legislative branch resides in a Congress divided into two houses, the Senate and the House of Representatives. The 24 senators are elected at large by a popular vote and can serve no more than 2 consecutive 6-year terms. The House is composed of district representatives representing a particular geographic area and makes up of 80% of the total number of representatives. There are 234 legislative districts in the Philippines, that elect their representatives to serve three-year terms. Aside from the exclusive powers of legislation, Congress may also declare war through a two-thirds vote in both upper and lower houses. The power of legislation, however, it is also subject to an executive check as the President retains the power to veto or stop a bill from becoming a law. Congress may only override this power with a two-thirds vote in both houses. So the third one is the judiciary branch, composed of a Supreme Court and lower courts created by law. Supreme Court is a 15-member court appointed by the President without the need to be confirmed by Congress. The appointment the President makes, however, is limited to a list of nominees provided by a constitutionally specified judicial and bar council. The Supreme Court justice may hear and appeal any cases dealing with the constitutional of any law, treaty, or decree of the government, cases where questions of just jurisdiction or just judicial error are connected, or cases where the penalty is official. So that is my report